Hi everyone, my name is Frank and I am a software engineer here at Lexicon, and one of the things I'm most known for here is being owned by these two wonderful little birds, one on the left called Richard Parker and the other one called Sherlock. And today what I want to talk to you about is coding on your iPad. Could you, should you, and more importantly, would you try that? And I want to kick things off with hopefully the last dodgy QR code you'll get this evening. It's just Menti, so don't worry about it too much, hopefully. And I want to kick off with a very simple question for you guys. Have you ever considered coding on an iPad or any sort of tablet, Android tablet, for example? Scan the code, answer. We're going to get to the actual results a little bit later on. I'll play some elevator music. Maybe get thumbs up when you guys most of you have clicked on the link. Yeah, get in there. Awesome. All right, might just move on. So this isn't such a wild idea, is it? Like, look at all of these different devices here. You know, much to the annoyance and displeasure of busy businessmen and teens in 90s sitcoms and my middle school maths teacher, what we ended up doing is reuniting all of these devices into, and more, into one that can just fit in your pocket. This wasn't the guy that did it, but that illustrates the point. Fast forward a few years, and so devices such as these have become extremely powerful and capable. You can buy an iPad these days that is equipped with essentially the exact same system on a chip that you would find on Apple's latest laptops and desktop computers, right? And many apps have started taking advantage of it, so you can do very professional video, photo editing, you got 3D modeling apps, vector graphics, you got demanding 3D games, and machine learning is splattered around all of these. What's more, you have like these beautiful touch displays with pen support, and you can touch external displays if you want, as well as a number of different USB or Bluetooth devices, such as my mouse and keyboard. So I bought one of these, right, and I'm like, cool, yeah, you know, yeah, beautiful, pretty drawings, but can I actually harness the power of this platform for something a little bit more? Can I actually make it my only device at home? Can I get rid of my MacBook Air? Many people have been wondering this for quite a while now, and the reality is, as it stands, there is pretty much nothing. It's a bit of a barren wasteland out there, more for the limitations of the software rather than the hardware. You cannot perform certain tasks that an IDE, any sort of development environment, requires in order to function properly, right? So that got me thinking, can we sort of work around it in one way or another? Well, if we can't install things locally, maybe we can find a solution in the cloud, right? And you just do cursory Google search. Two things sort of spring up and look pretty promising. On the one hand, you have cloud IDEs, things such as GitHub Code Spaces or Code Sandbox, or AWS Cloud9. Has anyone here sort of heard of some of these? Yeah, a few people. Cool. And the other one is desktop as a service. Again, there's a few options here, but probably the most established now are Azure Virtual Desktop and AWS Workspaces. Has anyone heard of any of those? Yeah, again, a couple of hands. Awesome. So what I decided to do is like, okay, I'll embark on this little journey, try a few of these out, and now here I am sharing my experience with all of you. So let's start with cloud IDEs. Knowing nothing about it, first thing I did, I opened the App Store, typed IDE in it, and this is what I was greeted with. The first result, well, the second result, Code Sandbox looked pretty promising. Thought, okay, I'll try this out. I like the idea of having a native app, and maybe, you know, interesting to see what capabilities it offers. You download it, you open it up, and this is sort of what you're greeted with, and it's a good start, right? It's a pretty clean design. You got your syntax highlighting. You have a couple of clicks, as you can see here. You can spin up a live dev environment for your React app, and you even have some dev tools that you can use to do a little bit of debugging. And there's definitely a lot more to like. It is very, very easy to start a new project, be it with a new or an existing code base, thanks to the GitHub integration. It has full stack capability, so it's not just front end. You can do Node and other things. It's pretty scalable. You can just select from different types of virtual machines, and it has a pretty good free tier, and even the paid options are pretty cheap. That's all well and good, but using it for a little bit, I quickly became quite frustrated with the coding experience. It was very hard and frustrating to do certain tasks that you would, think they're pretty basic, like, I don't know, like wrapping a selection in parentheses, for example. And it was not very customizable at all. You could change a few keyboard shortcuts, but that was about it. And on top of all of this, it's basically mostly limited to React, and Node, and a bit of Rust, a little bit of Python. But if you don't enter in these categories, you're probably not going to find what you're looking for. And for me, it was interesting, but not what I was looking for. So I thought, what about other alternatives? Is there something a little bit more flexible? And I laid my eyes on GitHub Code Spaces next. And the concept is super similar to Code Sandbox. Only in this case, you're trading a native app for a browser tab. But what you're getting is, in return, is a full web version of Visual Studio Code. I'm sure a lot of people here have either heard or used VS Code. It's probably a very popular editor these days. And it turns out, like, the web version, you can do pretty much everything you can do in your desktop version. You can install themes. And yes, I do use a light theme, and I'm very proud about it. You can install extensions, and basically platform programming languages, frameworks are as good as VS Code support is, which in general is pretty good. This example, I just created a Spring Boot Java app, and you can see, like, it's very easy to sort of start it up, and you get a nice little URL with which to interact with the web server. So that's great. So we get pretty much all the benefits that we got from Code Sandbox, but with a much more sophisticated development environment that's very extensible, and it supports a lot more languages and frameworks. I think the biggest issue that I found here is, as we learned tonight, Safari, well, everything you install on iPad OS is really just a wrap. Any browser is just a wrapper around Safari, right? Safari is not the best browser, really. So you do run into the occasional issue where you need to close the tab or reload it. Overall, it wasn't too bad, though. All right, so, well, you might think, okay, great, fantastic, problem solved. The reality is, though, that while it does a lot of things, and it's probably good for a portion of developers out there, it does not answer all your questions. Like, say, for example, you're a mobile dev. You need to work on an Android or iOS app, or a game developer who's developing on Unity. Or maybe one of my colleagues, you have a deep pathological hatred for VS Code. That can happen. What do you do then? Could desktop as a service be the answer for you? So to sort of find out, what I tried was Azure Virtual Desktop. This is a service by Azure, which anyone can use, and allows you to spin up either Windows or Linux full desktop environments. So basically virtual machines, but instead of interacting with an SSH, you just have a full-on desktop. It's incredibly customizable. You can do whatever, but in this case, I just went with a very simple, one instance of a machine with 2 cores and 8 gigs of RAM, And deployment took probably 5 minutes overall. And once I did that, I downloaded the remote desktop app, and boom, I was connected to my virtual desktop, and it was great. Now I basically have no limitations, right? It's a full experience, no vendor locking whatsoever. I can install whatever software I want, run whatever I need, and once I'm finished banging my head on the same bug for hours and hours, I can open the Azure app and terminate the instance. Everything's saved, I don't pay, fantastic. So as you said, yeah, full desktop experience is great. You get native apps for remote desktop protocol or VNC, whichever you prefer. It is extremely scalable, as we said. You can choose from a host of configurations of virtual machines. You can even get GPUs in case you need to do some machine learning or whatever other task requires a big beefy GPU for it. It's relatively easy to set up, not as easy as an IDE, but you get some really good step-by-step guides on the Azure website. And they also give you a pretty sizable $300 sort of starting credit with which you can actually test this wide at length. Then again, on this topic of cost, cost is also the major drawback. So for the machine I mentioned, 2 cores, 8 gigs, nothing special, using it 15 hours per week, you are looking at $60 to $70 per month, which adds up to quite a lot at the end of the year, right? Then depending on your network connection, you could also run into latency issues or compression artifacts, and it definitely uses a lot of bandwidth, so especially if you're on a metered connection, that may be a problem. So, all right, let's go back to Menti for a second. So let's ask this question again. Knowing what you know now, have you changed your mind, right? Would you now try one of these, sort of give it a go to any of these solutions? So it's interesting here, so in the previous case, so we got 11 said yes and 18 said yeah, nah. So kind of an even split, probably 30-60, interesting. Next slide, all right, cool. I think now you can vote on the next question, hopefully. There you go, yeah, awesome. Oh my God, that's exciting. Yeah. Let's give it a couple more seconds. Oh. Come on. Am I allowing multiple voting? All right. Well, it seems like maybe I drove a couple of people off. That's okay. That's okay because let's just go back. This is very smooth. Okay. That's okay. I think in my experience, if I had to wrap this all up, I think if you were a full stack developer or say a data scientist, working with big data sets or Python or R, or maybe you're just starting out, maybe you're a graduate or a career changer like myself, or you're working on a small project that doesn't require too many resources, and probably I'd suggest giving it a try at least. But if you're, again, a game dev, you're probably going to be annoyed with the latency, the slowness of the virtual desktop. If you're an iOS developer, ironically, you're probably out of luck because there's not a whole host of very good Mac OS virtual desktops. And if you're IoT dev or anyone having to connect to actual devices, again, not for you. So I guess until the day that Apple finally unleashes the full potential of the platform, which won't happen. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll be answering any questions. Thank you very much.
So Ben says, if you're working on your employer's code, what about concerns of leaking IP by using a service that's not been approved or vetted?
Oh yeah, definitely wouldn't recommend that. No. So it's interesting. Most of these platforms provide, they have good support for organizations. So if your organization, say, used something like GitHub Code Spaces, you'd be logging into whatever single sign-on you'd have for their organization. You definitely wouldn't want to use like your own personal account. Same thing with virtual desktops. Azure, as we know, the whole Microsoft ecosystem has a lot of integration with Azure Active Directory. So it could be a very good thing for companies. But again, it's pretty expensive.
Next question. Do you think this is the future of development, working from a tablet, and would you like to live in that future?
No. Well, to elaborate, do I think it's the future? Not yet. I think there's still, as we saw, quite a few limitations that I don't see being overcome in the like near future. But yeah, I just wish, like, my sort of gripe with all of this is like, we have all this power, why can't we use it locally, right? It just sort of makes no sense.
Time to build your own app, maybe? I don't know. Next question. How do you deal with weird issues with a touchscreen device when working on the iPad?
Yeah, so most of what I did was with a mouse and keyboard. And that's fine because it actually works really well. Even like, things like keyboard shortcuts or function keys, all of that works really well. I was quite impressed. Even external displays now, iPad OS has this task sort of window management, which is not great, but it's actually getting a lot better. So it was a pleasant experience.
Not to start the wars, but any idea if Android has better or more options?
I think Android might, but probably only if you have a rooted device, because then again, all these mobile operating systems, they're quite strict in the things you can and cannot do. Like, all the apps are sandboxed in a way or another, right? For good reasons, but also limits you. For example, let's say you want to start a local server, all right? Most of us web developers, we need the front end to live on localhost 8000 or something like that. iPad OS and I think also Android have the same limitation where you can't really do that. You can't expose ports.
What size iPad did you use to test these scenarios?
I bought a 13-inch iPad Pro a while ago, secondhand. So yeah, pretty big device. But for the most part, I had it connected to my external display as well.
And you might have already touched on this, but cloud VMs forego any benefit the client device has, e.g. a powerful CPU. So what benefits are there to coding on a tablet instead of a desktop or a laptop?
Yeah, I think it's not so much the tablet itself. I think you can sort of abstract this concept a little bit more and be like, what if I only had one device that was limited in some way? For example, let's say you only have a Raspberry Pi, right? Tiny little computer with 1 gig of memory. Probably can't do much with it, but what you can do is open a browser or remote desktop app and connect to a more powerful machine that can execute that task. So I guess that's the main thing that cloud allows you to do.
That's all the questions from Slido, unless anyone wants to see me run around like an idiot. And who doesn't, really? I think that's it. Yeah.
Thank you very much.